Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Augusta F. Smallshaw, 1986, Part 3. This was originally published as Smallshaw Family Memories Collection, or SFMC number 2, published on March 15, 1989. This is a continuation of the interview that I did with my mother's mother, my grandmother, Augusta Lillian Fisher Smallshaw. What do you remember about this trip to Cleveland? Well, Ruth and John were going to Lakeside, Ohio to a family reunion, and they wanted me to go with them. I left on the 21st of August. The day after I got here, they had a lovely garden party for their wedding anniversary. It was really beautiful, about 30 people here. All the tables out on the lawn, turkey and ham, and a maid to help serve it. Champagne to drink to their health. A lot of them went down to the beach house, about 60 or 80 steps down, for a bottle of beer. I didn't know they were going to have this, or I'd have brought a gift and a card, so I felt like I was slipping. Anyway, on Saturday, the 23rd of August, we all went to Lakeside. Mark and Jan came from Massachusetts, Patty from Cincinnati, and Grandma from Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I should have gotten an award for coming the farthest, but I guess they forgot. Anyway, we went to Lakeside, and it was a lovely, lovely get-together. John's relations came from all corners of the U.S., and Ruth's Aunt Christina, my husband's youngest sister, living in Hamilton, Ontario, came with her youngest son, Bill. Ruth had 3 of her kin at Lakeside. John had about 40. It's something they do every year, so the cousins get to know one another, and I think it's a marvelous idea. I think we took about 100 photographs, snaps of different ones. The program was mostly visiting. We had 2 boats at our disposal. John, Mark, Peter, and Jan went golfing several times. They played a lot of volleyball. I joined in and played shuffleboard. I think they call it quoits. Peter taught me how to play shuffleboard, and I won. I felt pretty good about that. I told Peter that he's a very good teacher. Then on the 30th, we had to come back. The relations were coming and going all the time. John's Aunt Helen Lacey celebrated her 90th birthday there. We went to the Lakeside Hotel. There were about 30 or 40 there. Ruth arranged to have a lovely birthday cake and flowers. We all celebrated Helen's 90th birthday. Helen is John's mother's older sister, so that was quite a nice occasion. What are your feelings about religion? My feelings about religion? Well, some people say they get religion late in life. Some go halfway through life before they feel they embrace religion. Some feel like they were always Christians. I never had any feeling about being a newborn Christian or anything like that, because I felt like I was always a Christian. When I left home and went to Regina, I was confirmed in St. Paul's Church. I was confirmed as an Anglican. Both my children were confirmed in St. Peter's Church in Regina. When I was working in Regina, it was the end of the First World War. A lot of the young fellows were coming back from France. I used to say, "What church do you belong to?" Somehow or other, I had a lot of dates with the boys. I was always getting invited to go to a show or skating or dances. Some of the boys I'd go out with, they'd say, "I'm sure there's no such thing as a God." One young fellow said, "I know there's no such thing as a God. There couldn't be a God, or he'd never allow that hell on earth in France that we went through, with all those people getting killed." I said, "Well, God created us to be free will creatures. If we weren't free will creatures, we'd be robots. So we have to have our free will. If the rulers of the nations choose to use their free will to fight, that is not what God wants. So wars are created by men, not God. So we're creatures of free will, and if we want to use our free will to do evil, we have to reap the consequences." And that's the hell on earth in France was the consequences of man's not using their free will the way they should. The Bible tells us that there will always be war until we get to the end of this dispensation, of this age. We don't know what's ahead of us, but we do know that the end of this age is when we'll have a new dispensation, when Jesus Christ comes back to rule, and it will be heaven on earth then. That's my view of religion. What do you think about our president down here in the United States, Mr. Ronald Reagan? I hate him. Ha ha ha. I think he's a warmonger. He's the head of the richest country in the world with the highest standard of civilization. A great privilege to live in the United States, also Canada. He's always promoting war here and there, scared to death of the Russians. The Russians don't want to overrun the states at all, I don't think. He's promoting war in this country and that country, and I think he's doing the wrong thing. He thinks he's doing the right thing. I don't, so I don't like him. I don't like our Prime Minister in Canada either. He's just a little toady to Ronald Reagan. They secretly allowed the United States to test a bomb in Canada, which never should have happened. They tested a long-range missile in northern Alberta. A lot of people were against it. Crowds went up there and protested. I don't go and protest anything like that, because I think the governments will go and do what they want anyway. I side with them, but I don't go on protesting sessions. So that's the way I feel about Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney. What do you think about President Jimmy Carter? I liked him. He was more for peace, and he was more for the people. He was more socialist. He was socialistic-minded. He had a government for the people, whereas Ronald Reagan is, in Canada they call it conservative. That's for big business and war. They take from the poor and give to the rich. But Jimmy Carter was just the opposite, and I liked him. If I had been an American, I would have voted for him. My husband always said that Jesus Christ was the greatest socialist that walked the face of the earth. So that's the way I feel about it. What do you think about President Gerald Ford? I don't think I know much about him. What about President Richard Nixon? Oh, he was old Nick on earth. He was a liar. I hated him. He had no brains either. I can still see him coming on the television. That Watergate problem, he promoted that. Then he came on TV and said, all those that were implicated in Watergate will be punished. And he was the biggest promoter of it. So he was a downright double-down liar. I hated him. Still do. I hate and I love. What do you think about President Lyndon Johnson? He was sort of in between. He took over from John F. Kennedy. Kennedy was another war promoted. He promoted that crazy war in Vietnam. You didn't like President Kennedy? Oh, heavens no. Was him being Catholic? Did that have anything to do with your not liking him? No, I don't think so. I didn't like him because he promoted that war in Vietnam and all those lovely young fellows getting killed. My grandson-in-law was in Virginia when that war was being promoted. Thousands and thousands of young Americans flocked up to Canada to get away from it. Some people might have called them cowards, but I think they were smart. If I had been there, I'd have done the same thing. Gary Conway, that married my granddaughter, he came up from Virginia. He liked it in Canada. He's a Canadian citizen, but he doesn't like the climate. He likes Virginia climate better. What did you think about President Eisenhower? I wasn't fussy about him. He just got to be president because he made his name as a general. My son was very disappointed that he won the election. He was a conservative for big business and war, but he was popular at the time, and that's how he got in. Did you like Harry Truman? Yes, he was a nice little fellow. We know more about the United States and the government, even to the ball games and the sports. We have them thrown at us through TV all the time, than the Americans know about Canada. While I'm in the United States and I'm talking to a lot of different people, and they ask me what part of Canada I come from, and I say, Regina, the capital of Saskatchewan. They'll say, do you know somebody that lives in Montreal, which is a half a world away? So that's how ignorant they are about Canada. They say that they're going to teach more Canadian things in the schools in the United States from now on. Get them educated about Canada. They should. They're 100 years behind in teaching them. We know a lot about the United States, about how it's governed, about the sports, and the way they live in the different states. We're taught in school the different states and the capitals of the states in the U.S. I don't think there's 1 in 1,000 that know the capitals of the provinces in Canada. Canada is such a vast country. It's the Dominion of Canada, and Dominion means from sea to sea, which is from British Columbia to Nova Scotia, the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. The climate from one side to the other is altogether different. The climate in Victoria, which is the capital of British Columbia, is very much like England. And I have a lot of friends that are retired and living in Victoria. Vancouver is very, very damp and a lot of rain. And then there are the 3 prairie provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. That's where the wheat is grown. We have a very rigid climate here. It can go to 40 below zero in the winter. A bitter cold wind. You could freeze your face in 2 minutes. In the summer, my lady friend from England said, "We don't have any spring in Canada. I hate it." We just go from cold to hot. No lovely spring like you have in England with the lovely buttercups and daisies growing in the fields. So she doesn't like Canada. She's a war bride. In the summer it can go to be 90 to 95 degrees in the shade, which is very hot and dry. So that's why we don't have such good complexions in Canada like they have in England, which is a very moderate climate, very rainy, growth all the year round. England is a beautiful country. The national flower for England is the rose, and they grow all over England. Anybody who goes to England sees all the roses, just growing in every little backyard. Beautiful roses, that's their flower. Scotland has the thistle. Ireland has the shamrock. Peter, do you know the flower of Wales? It's the leek of all things. Ha ha ha! So England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. I was born in Southwold, Suffolk, which is on the coast of the North Sea, and it's a very fashionable seaside resort. My father happened to be teaching in Yarmouth, a little bit higher up the coast than Southwold. Not so nice to live there. He used to go out and teach range finding. He was in the Royal Artillery, and he used to take a canoe and go out into the North Sea and teach the fellows to signal the Morse code with the flags, you know. My dad was like me, and he got seasick easy. He'd be out there, and the boat would start to rock, and he'd get seasick. So I guess I come by my seasickness easily. But that's what he was doing, shooting with the cannon guns in the Royal Artillery. They have to find out the distance for shooting off the cannons. So Dad was teaching range finding in Yarmouth. Mother and us 3 kids lived in Southwold. My sister and my younger brother and I were born in Southwold. We were all born on a Sunday. How did you feel about Great Britain losing her empire? I don't feel too awfully bad about it. If you read the history of all throughout the world, the empires rise and fall. There was a Roman Empire and other different empires. They all come and go. I think that's the way God ordains it to be. Right now, the United States is pretty high up in the empire, and they'll have their day, and they'll go down. What did you think about Winston Churchill? Ha ha! He was a great big bluff. He was a leader. When the war was on, we all looked up to him. My husband thought he was a big bully. He was. Well, we were pretty well run down when the war was on. England was being bombed so terribly. He had his underground office in London. He was a good leader. We all felt like he was going to be the savior of the country, and he was. A marvelous leader, a very ambitious man. He came from aristocracy. His mother and father were elite, you know. He was a good leader, and even in Canada we looked up to him, because England is a part of Canada, really. We were all depending on whether the war was won or lost. Were you afraid of Adolf Hitler? Well, I think everybody was afraid of him. He was insane, but he had power to lead people to war. He went down to defeat, which was supposed to be, killed himself, shot himself. So he was the cause of thousands and thousands of lives being lost, which is a terrible thing. That was a terrible war. The craziest thing that was ever invented in the world is war. What do you think about Margaret Thatcher? Oh, she's a conservative. She calls herself the Iron Lady, a stubborn so-and-so. My lady friend's sister in England said that when they were voting, that if she comes to power, she would leave the country. But she did come to power, and still is, and she hasn't left the country. Ha 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 ha! Still there's a lot think she's okay, and a lot that feel like I do that she's too stubborn. She prides herself in it. So it makes her happy, all honor to her. I don't think it's right. Ha 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 ha! But who am I? What do you think about Queen Elizabeth? I think she's marvelous, absolutely marvelous. A marvelous example to her people. She's a wonderful woman. Queen Elizabeth before her, Queen Elizabeth I. It was through her reign that the English language became established as the business language all around the world. We've had a lot of leaders since then, but there's none as good as Elizabeth. I think she's a very good Christian, a very good living person. I think she's taught her children to be the same. One little boy went to Sunday school, and the teacher asked him, "Who is God?" He thought for a while, and he said, "Oh, I know who God is. God's the man who saved the Queen." God save our gracious Queen. Ha 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 ha! What do you think about Prince Charles? Prince Charles is a very thoughtful man. I don't know whether he'd be as good a king as Elizabeth has been a queen. I don't know. We don't know that. But when he was born, they named him Charles. My husband said, "Oh, I wish they hadn't named him Charles. There was a Charles in the royal family that was not a good man." So that remains to be seen. Do you like Lady Diana? Yes, I think we all do. She's very lovable. I think she does her best. Not an easy role she has. About Sarah Ferguson, I don't know. Andrew is a little bit younger than her and far too handsome. All the girls fall in love with him. Sarah's going to have a hard time hanging on to him. Ha ha ha! I don't know whether I'll live long enough to see them live together long or not. I wouldn't be surprised if they break up after a few years. He could fall madly in love with another woman. So Charles and Lady Di will be king and queen. Yes, when the queen gives up. When she dies? When she dies or decides to retire, she might be like Queen Victoria and hang on and hang on. Queen Victoria was queen for 60 years. Her son Edward was supposed to be king and was kicking around, getting into mischief all the time, and he got to be a fairly old man before he got to be king, before she died. She didn't retire. She died. She came to be Queen Victoria when she was 18, and she reigned for 60 years. She married a German prince, Prince Albert, Queen Victoria did. What do you think about Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King? Mahatma Gandhi had great faith in what he believed, and he believed in getting the English out of India by peaceful means, and he really worked at it. He was a wonderful little man. Somebody who read his biography said he wasn't very good to his wife. I don't know. I didn't read that. In the end, it was successful, his belief. The British did decide to give them their own rule. When my grandson Brian was in India, he said as he traveled around India, he could see all of the effects of British rule when they were there. Maybe you'll see that someday. A man smuggled a gun into the prison and killed Mahatma Gandhi. He was very sorry afterward he'd done it. The man that killed Abraham Lincoln was very sorry afterwards, too. So these people get to be fanatics and do things that they're sorry for afterwards. Martin Luther King had a big mouth. Ha ha ha! I could see where his belief. Whenever he went and spoke, there was an uprising afterwards. So I was sorry that he got killed, but I wasn't altogether agreeing with his preaching, because he preached for his people, which he should, and did, but he was a riser-upper. Wherever he went, the blacks went berserk. What did you think about President Franklin D. Roosevelt? Oh, President Roosevelt was a very good president. His wife was a wonderful woman. He felt very bad when the wars were on, and I think he did his best when he met the leader of the Russian country and Winston Churchill. They all did their best to keep the peace in the world. Thank you very much, Mrs. Smallshaw. We'll resume this later. To be continued. Well, that concludes today's presentation. Augusta F. Smallshaw, 1986, Part 3. Good luck to you with your efforts in family history. If this interests you, finding, preserving, and sharing old letters, diaries, and photographs, and interviewing elderly relatives while they're alive. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.